What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Optimize You podcast, the place where we're optimizing everything for you to help provide and give you value on mindset, health, wellness, fitness, and everything in between. And today I'm joined with my man, as usual, Alex. What's going on, brother?
What is going on, Matt? I'm just sitting here looking out at the golf course. Got a round scheduled for Saturday. We're figuring shit out. We're figuring shit out. You know, every time I get on here, it's like just trying to get a little bit closer to what we're supposed to be doing, to our purpose, to our mission. I've had some times throughout this year where I thought I found it, and I think we're close, but it's just a matter of kind of continuing to push forward. How about you, dude? How you doing?
Good, man. It's getting colder here. So colder, I mean like 40 degrees. Finally had to kick the heat on at the house for the first time yesterday. But other than that, man, things are dialed in. It's fishing season is coming. It's slowing down. I'll say that. The fish, there was a time right now in the last couple of weeks where they're biting really, really heavy, but these water temperatures start dropping below 50. The bite starts slowing down. And not to mention, it's just cold as shit being out there on the water. So that's what I'm bummed about up here in Portland, Oregon. But aside from that, everything else is going well, man.
When does
I was in a similar boat. I know you go ahead.
I was just going to ask when does like you're getting close to the end of the fishing season. When does it start back up for you guys up there?
Spring. Like, I mean, there's people that'll fish through the whole year. Yeah. The downside is just like the metabolism slows down for the fish during when the water temperatures drop. And so they hunker down, they try to find coverage. They try to stay, most of the time they go deep and they huddle by rocks where they can try to keep their warmth as much as possible. And it's not that they don't bite, you just have to really entice them to bite versus like leading into that. It's fun, man. Like you can just cast, even be remotely in their direction and they'll come chase you. But you have to actually change up your presentation, put it right in front of their face. It has to entice them. And it has to be worth it for them to move to go and eat a meal. So that's why they kind of like gorge themselves before they head into this season, because they know they're not going to be as active. Metabolism's a lot slower. So it sucks from a, activity standpoint, but a lot of fishermen use it as a challenge and are like, I'm going to continue to fish during the cold weather. If I can get them to bite then I can really fine tune my techniques and figure them out. And that's cool too. I want to actually do that as well. I got the right gear for that this year because it's cold as hell out there. If you don't have the right gear, your hands are shaking. You can't even tie fishing knots and it's just miserable. But if you have the right stuff, you can actually put some things together and like just really enjoy that different season and practice and get better. So that's what I'm focused on this year is I'm going to try to get out there multiple times, even when it's cold, even when it's tough, and see what I could do, man.
I love it, dude. Yeah, in Minnesota, ice fishing's huge, but it's people have some big ass rigs. Like my dad for a long time had this huge thing, like this huge ice house. God, what was it called? Yeti, like one of those Yeti ice houses, and it was just huge. You could like fucking live in the thing. But the problem is that you needed to have like 22 inches of ice to put this thing out there because it was so heavy. So he couldn't get it out on the ice for like 3 straight years. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to downgrade to something that I can actually get out there in lower amounts of ice. And I mean, it's still heated and everything. So you're a lot more comfortable than probably your scenario where you're out there in 40-degree weather and you probably, you got to have
that's
some
true.
sort of
I didn't
small
think
gloves
about that
and stuff like that. But
yeah, dude, that's true. Like if you have those houses, like how he had, that they even make them like wood house, like legitimate like wood houses and stuff. Yeah. And so I seen them where they have like the tent set up too, which is obviously you probably get better access. But yeah, man, I've seen them have heaters in there and have their food and their skillet and everything. Like that's little portable house on the ice. Pretty cool.
Oh yeah, mostly it's a drinking activity though. For most people in Minnesota, it's just it's an excuse to drink more because there's nothing else to fucking do in the wintertime.
Yep, for sure. And during that time when you're fishing, the bite is slow, man. So it's like you got to be you got to focus on something.
You crush it though.
I can see.
Sometimes they crush it. Like in the winter, like the ice fishing is like my dad's had. We used to do it a pretty good amount. I guess I was never really a huge fan of it, but just because it kind of was boring. Like it was just like I was more of a fan of it when I was drinking, because that was kind of the point of it, I think, like ice fishing. But there was some times where we get into a lot of them, like get into a bunch of crappies, like get into a bunch of sunnies, like some good panfish that we would get into.
Did you guys have walleye there too, or no?
There's walleye. There's not as like on our lake. There's not as much, but there's like some of the other lakes. They get into them pretty good. Like, cause we got my parents' lake that they live on in Minnesota. They're connected to 2 other bigger lakes, and those lakes have a lot more walleye on them. And like they even have, they've caught some muskie out of there. Not my parents, but like some of their friends have caught like muskie, and I know there's like even some trout, I believe, in one of the lakes. It's like 100 and some feet deep, and they'll catch some lake trout in there.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know that my local lake here too, they stock a bunch of trout. I catch them on accident because I'm not going for them, but there's a lot of them for sure.
Let's get into the topic, huh?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's kind of it.
We haven't really even announced it, but it actually is like what we've been talking about kind of plays in pretty good. Today, we're talking all about self-care, like the importance of self-care, what we do to practice self-care and practice, I guess I would say, like for me, like loving myself, doing things that make me feel my best, set me up for success. What do you kind of define first off as self-care?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways we can go, but the first thing I think about is the physical body. And when my body's feeling beat up. So, that's why I program and do things not only for my clients, but myself. I do them in about 4 to 6 week increments, no more than like an 8 week straight on a cycle. And then allowing myself to go into what I call a deload week, meaning that you don't completely take it off from working out, but you kind of take the foot off the pedal in terms of intensity, the amount of repetitions, things like that, so that your body can repair itself. Because I think a lot of people forget about that, and not paying attention to self-care and having that self-awareness is crucial. And it'll kind of dictate the longevity and the intensity and how long you want to do this for, and your ability to do it for long term. So if you're committed to do this long term, you have to be hyper aware of the amount of effort that you're putting forward on a consistent basis, and know when it's time to let off that gas pedal a little bit so that you can continue to train for a long period of time. And if you're any ounce or bit of competitive, I think this is one of the hardest things to do. I think it's a skill that has to be developed over time. It took me a long, long time, specifically like when I was going through like the competitions and training for those things. Like it was really brutal on the body, doing double days, like having to hit certain numbers and markers and having to keep my lifts up super high to be able to even compete with other people. That was tough and that was challenging. And that's when I like would walk around and my body would feel broken. Now that I don't do that anymore, I train much smarter. And so my body feels great now. And so I've put myself in a position to not have to worry about having to hit certain benchmark times or numbers or, certain parameters. I can allow my body to recover like how it's supposed to. When it's time to push the foot on the gas and lift heavy and increase the volume on my workouts, like great, I do it. But I don't do it for more than like 6 weeks right now. And I kind of save that 7th week for, again, I'll still go through new workouts after that. It's a good time to change it up for me. And I do less repetitions, less movements, lighter to moderate weights than what I was doing for the previous 6 weeks. And then by the time I finish that 7th week, I head into another 6 week. And that's been like leaving me chomping at the bit on week 7. It's almost like I get to week 6 and I can't wait for a deload week. My sessions are going to be shorter. Like I know my body's going to feel better. But you know what? By the time I get to the end of that 7th week, I'm ready to hit it hard again. And it's because I took that deload week. So I would highly encourage people, if they haven't before, it's a great way to give your body some self-care from the physical standpoint. And of course, we can dive into the mental side too. But what are some things you do, man? Like what comes to mind when you think about self-care?
Yeah, I think the way you defined it was really good. Like almost like recovery, things that help your body and your mind recover, right? You mentioned that too. I think that's a really good definition, because I was trying to kind of think about what I would say. And really my thought initially was stuff that makes me feel better, right? Like stuff that makes me relaxed, de-stress, lights me up, like just things that help. And once you said that, I was like, oh, it is like kind of things that help recover, like help you recover mentally, physically. So I think that's really good. The deload stuff, is something that I struggle with so heavily for the longest period of time, where I was just 6-7 days a week, sometimes 2 days out of the week, just killing myself in the gym, killing myself with running and other forms of cardio, thinking that that's like what it was. But from that, I had no energy. From that, I had like sleep was dog shit, which I think is one of the biggest forms of self-care that we can practice is sleep and when I say sleep, not only prioritizing getting like at least 7 hours a night or prioritizing maximizing the amount of sleep you can get. Cause I know some people, you just have crazy shit going on. I would say for my recommendation around self-care would just be like, whatever you can do to prioritize that sleep is probably going to be the most bang for your buck. I love the whole deloading, making sure that you're taking rest days, recovery days, not killing yourself in the gym. I know for me on that side of things, when I went from doing 6 to 7 days a week, Mind Pump actually got me realizing that I was probably doing too much. Like my body was just so run down. I don't know if I saw like one that they talked about the signs of overtraining or something like that. And I was like, okay, I got to be overtraining. And something within me, it took me a lot to do this because I was somebody who could never take more than like one day off in a row, right? Like it was like if I felt lost. I felt like I was going to balloon up into this just fat ass if I took a day off of lifting, like, or take more than one day. And so like that was a huge step and it was a very stressful thing. But I saw once I started doing that and taking rest days, and I'll throw in a rest week every once in a while if I feel like my body needs it. Those things, I saw a lot more changes in my body with 3 days a week, full body, with allowing myself to not be so active, being active, always getting my steps in, always moving, trying to do yoga, getting workouts in. But I feel like me sticking in the 3 to 5 times a week of intense exercise, giving myself rest days, making sure I'm walking, make sure I'm stretching, all those things have been huge for my self-care, recovery, and really helping me be the best and feel my best. And that's not to say that I think this is a good reminder pod for me, because this is something that some of these areas have slipped, and it kind of is from some of the pods we've had in the past. I know we had that one where we talked about my struggles and just really how to get out of a rut. And I feel like I'm coming out of that, but this is a good reminder, especially on the sleep side of things. I think we've talked about this millions of times. I think for both of us, sleep is one of those first things that it's like, oh, like that, when we get that going in the right direction, it just makes us feel so much better. And it mentally, physically, every area, I think for me, starts to go a lot better. And when I do that.
100%. I think it's one of those things too, where it's easy to forget, man. Like you just brought up sleep, you brought up the things that you do. And it's like you minimize and found the sweet spot with your training. And I think the easiest way to do this and not forget that you need to also give your body self-care is to develop it and integrate it in your routine, which is why I go 6 weeks before I go into a deload week. If I didn't have a structure or some sort of routine, I would just keep training, right? Until eventually I crash and burn and I had no plan and no strategy. That's how I used to train. And so I would like wait for my body to send me these like glaring signals of either I'm like injuring myself constantly, or like I'm always like tweaked or nicked or banged up. Or like my sleep would get restless, and then like my training would be shitty. And then I'm like, man, maybe I need to take a little, my foot off the gas a little bit. Now, instead of doing that, what I always used to do is like, now it's integrated in my routine. I know for me, what works really well after that 6 week, I start to, that's right where I'm starting to feel beat up in my current strength cycle. And then I transition it right into that week 7, which like leaves me chomping at the bit. But that's only because it's part of my routine now. And so when I can do that, man, it just gets more fun because I have something to look forward to, and I get to nourish and give my body that self-care. And the most important thing is I don't have to think about it. Like I know it's already there. It's already structured. So I think that's a big thing too, because most people will wait, myself included, until we crash and burn before we realize like, oh shit, maybe I need to implement some self-care. So instead of hitting the eject button or like the panic button of like, oh man, I better do something, I think finding ways to seamlessly integrate it into your routine is like one of the best things that you could do. What about you, man? Do you integrate it into your routine at all?
Well, first, I'd love for you, because I don't think we've really dove into this a lot on the show. What, for people out there, like they might not even know what the fuck deload weeks are or whatever. I know you talked about it briefly, but can you explain like what a week 6 for you would look like and what a week 7 would look like? Because I think this is a really good thing for people to do, because I know that people like us, super competitive, probably former athletes, you can be so competitive with yourself in the gym and thinking that you got to keep pushing and that more is going to get you bigger and stronger and all of that. And, what we've talked about briefly here is just that that's not the case, right? I've gotten a lot stronger by managing my workload in the gym and making sure I'm taking rest days and having some weeks where I don't push it as hard like that. I don't have it as structured as you. So I'd love for you to talk about what like a week 6 would look like and what a week 7 would look like, just so people out there can kind of dial this into their routine.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I'm glad we're diving into this. So, and the reason I structure it this way is, for one, I had so many trial and errors that I was like, man, I got to change something. And then I started going to the data and I started going to the research, and I found that when they did studies with people that took their lifts and their strength movements to failure versus when they took it to 1 to 2 reps before failure, it was actually more beneficial from the group that took it 1 to 2 to 3 reps before failure. So they didn't quite reach maximal failure. And I think a huge reason to that is so that they didn't apply so much damage to the muscle tissue that they could actually come back the next day or in the following week or within a day or two and continue to keep training, versus the people that pushed all their lifts to a max. They did so much damage that they needed to rest longer, which limited the amount of volume that they could do in an entire week. So once I figured that out, I was like, okay, you don't have to push everything to failure to still make gains, to still make progress. And then you work with people that are on the opposite side of the spectrum that don't push hard enough. So if we're looking at like, this is why you mentioned cardio too, but this is why the importance of strength comes in, because in order for your body to adapt and apply one of the most important tissues on our body, our lean body mass, which is muscle mass in particular, in order to get that stronger, in order to get that to grow, you have to apply a very specific stimulus, meaning it has to be progressive in nature. So if we're talking about weeks 1 to week 6, in week 1, I'm not lifting the same weights as I am in week 6. So I'm progressing that over time. So I'm going to continue to do the same movements, but the volume, so the amount of repetitions I'm going to do, is going to start higher and I work to lower. This is just generally speaking. It could be totally different, but I'm going to work higher. Let's say I'm doing sets of 10 on week 1. By the time we get to week 6, I'm doing maybe a set of 2 or 3 on that same lift, with the goal of trying to increase the weight every time I decrease my repetition. So I'm applying a different stimulus. I'm adding more load so that my body has to accommodate that load, and in turn, which builds strength and builds muscle. The problem is, if you continue to keep doing that, if I didn't have a week 6 transition into week 7, is let's just say I just kept going week 7, week 8, week 9, week 10, at some point that window is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then your rate of progression is going to slow down. You basically hit a dead end, right? Until your body, either you start failing lifts, or you just physically can't perform them, and, just due to the sheer weight. So it's like, okay, there's got to be a fine line there. So that's where the transition of a deload comes in. So on week 6, I'm lifting my heaviest. I'm still not going to failure, but I'm lifting way heavier than I was in week 1. Week 1 is kind of just setting the foundation, getting the base. By week 6, I'm lifting my heaviest. And then by week 7, I'm transitioning into some movements that I would probably see in my next cycle. So I'll change up the movements so that I can get some practice with it on that week 7 at a much lighter weight, probably higher repetitions, and definitely less sets. So if I was normally doing like 3 or 4 sets on a movement, I'm only going to do 1 or 2 on week 7, right? So the sets are going to be really less. The weight's going to be a lot lighter. I'm introducing my body to newer stimuluses, and it's also helping elicit some good blood flow to help recover. So if I just keep pushing the same movements as I did from weeks 1 through 6, and I transition into week 7, it's not bad or good, but what I like to do is I like to get a jump start on my next cycle. So week 7, I'm actually practicing the movements that I'm going to see in my next week 1 to week 6, right? Or in this case, it would be technically 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, so on and so forth. Right. So that's kind of what I do. And that's what I found from trial and error that works really, really well. And it keeps me progressing. It's not too little to where my body doesn't quite adapt to the new stimulus, but it's not too much either. And so, that's the sweet spot that I found that works really well for me. For my clients, I do them more on like a 4 to 6, depending on their training age and their skill level. But yeah, 6 weeks works really well for me. That 7th week transitioning into the deload again. I even limit the amount of days I do it too. So think of it as just like it's almost like a 50% of a workout, like meaning the reps, the volume that you're doing, the loading. And it's really hard sometimes, because sometimes you feel really good on week 7 and you're like, man, I want to lift super heavy. Like I could have went heavier this week, and that's good. And I look at that as like, give yourself that low hanging fruit or that piece of candy because it's going to leave you chomping at the bit going into that next week where you're really going to start a new cycle. You're going to set yourself up with a new foundation. We got some new movements here, and we're going to expose ourselves to a different stimulus so we can continue to keep progressing. And so that's kind of, hopefully that makes sense. I know I threw a lot out there, but
no,
that's how I do it.
I love it. And that kind of gives everybody out there who maybe hasn't done this, or you're finding that you're always sore, right? Because I think that this is something where, like, we're talking self-care, we're talking recovery. They're kind of one and the same, right? And so if you're not able to recover and you feel like, oh, I'm constantly sore. I know for me, when I was younger, I used to think that soreness was like, that was the sign of a good workout, right? So like if I wasn't sore, it was like, I didn't push it enough, right? And so then I would do it even harder the next time. And I got to that point where I was always sore. Like I felt like I was like hobbling up shit and like constantly having to push through workouts. And I didn't realize that wasn't how it should be. And I couldn't sleep. Like it was a super broken sleep. That's another like big sign. Just run down, low energy, not sleeping is good. Like just all that kind of stuff is some signs that you probably need to implement some of this stuff, or implement a rest week. Like a rest week is super stressful and you don't even have to go that crazy. You could just do 4 or 5 days off. That could be enough to just push you forward. And you'll be surprised. You come back into the gym after that and you're still doing the same kind of weights. Barely, like sometimes I'll have a little bit of drop off, but it's such a small amount where you think in your mind, you drop this whole story that it's going to be like, oh, I'm going to come back and I lost 50 pounds on my bench and, 75 pounds on my squat. I can barely fucking do anything. And the nature of a lot of this too is like so I started doing deadlifting again because I was just at my parents and they have a lot of stuff there. I have a lot of equipment. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take the summer off of being at a gym and just work out from home, and got some good workouts in. But I wasn't doing heavy weight. Like the highest dumbbells were like 55 that I had, which is good. You can do a lot of shit with that. But for me, and I'm assuming you're probably similar, like pushing some heavy fucking weight, there's not a lot better than that, right? It's like, it just feels so good when you're getting stronger and you feel just, I don't know. For me, it feels so good to push heavy fucking weight. And I got back into the gym and I was like, I'm going to try doing some deadlifts, and I'm a little crazy. I kind of go a little overboard sometimes. And so like I was like, all right, I'll push it. And I still did I think I did like 3 plates and 25, like without deadlifting for like 4 months, right? 5 months. And so like, that's just another example. Like I was working out, but I wasn't doing anything that was like a deadlift during that portion of time. And I still was up within, 75 pounds of my max. Right. And I didn't push it as much, but that's just kind of an example too of like, you can take a long period of time off. And I think a lot of that also goes down to you talking about training age and stuff like that. The longer you've been doing it, the harder it is to lose it, is my kind of thought process there, where it seems like as I've gotten stronger and gotten more muscle, you kind of have to do less to like maintain. And it's not like you bounce back a lot quicker. Like if you're sick, all of that stuff. But what are some other things that you do on top of, I know we kind of went deep into training and how that can be a huge form of self-care, just really taking consideration into your body. Like what are some other things that you do throughout your day, your week to make sure you're prioritizing yourself and your body and your mind?
A couple different things that stand out to me right away is do something that I love. And it doesn't, like, obviously I love fitness and health and nutrition, but sometimes getting away from that and remembering why we do those things so that we can use our body and go do fun shit, I think is super important. And so I know you're big into golf. I love golf too. I love fishing. And it's funny. It's like when you stand on the bow of the boat and you're working the trolling motor and you're standing there for 8-9 hours a day, your back will be smoked. Like, so you're also looking down at electronics. So you're in like this over like hunched position, right? So it just gives you more incentive to keep training so that you can go and enjoy the things that, using my example, that I love to do, standing on the front of the boat, you know, casting and not having my back be on fire or me being hunched over. I still feel it. It still burns. And it's, you know, you still get like a different kind of workout. But dude, that stuff, that sort of thing frees me. That's huge in my self-care. Another thing that I implement is stretching and mobility. So anytime I've been sitting down for extended periods of time, I know that my hip flexors are really tight. I need to do some opening there. I do something called the saddle stretch, where you're sitting on the men mostly are really terrible at this stretch, but what I'm talking about is sitting on your shins, like putting your heels to your butt, right? And being able to sit all the way back. And if your butt can touch your feet and you can sit there comfortably, that's a good sign. Generally speaking, for men, this took me a while. Like I could not sit back I didn't have the flexibility. My knees were super tight. My quads were tight. My hip flexors were tight. My ankles were super tight. And so for me, I had about like when I first started, about a foot gap between my butt and my heels. I just couldn't do it. And so you can start up high and then you can kind of gradually work yourself lower and lower and lower. When you do it every single day, like eventually you'll be able to sit all the way down. Women, for whatever reason, they're like Gumby for the most part. They can just sit back and like sit on their feet, no problem. And so that's one stretch that I love, because that's like my form of self-care. When I feel like I need to include some mobility, is I like doing that saddle stretch. So I sit back on my heels, I put my hands behind me, and I really try to open up my hips and even like tilt my head back. And that stretch for me is great, along with the world's greatest stretch. If you guys haven't done that one, it's basically like a long lunge, and throwing some trunk rotations in there as well. And those are things mobility wise that I do for self-care for sure, man. And then we didn't even dive into the mental side of things, but what do you do aside from, we dove into the physical side of things. What do you do as far as, and taking care of our body, but what do you do as far as your versions of self-care?
Yeah. Yeah. I think all that stuff you said there was great. Mobility over the last 2-3 years has been something it hasn't been like always a consistent thing, but it definitely is. Like when I'm rolling, my body's feeling the best. Mobility has been a huge ankle, hip, shoulder mobility. Those are the 3 big areas that I like to hit when I'm doing stretching. I do that before my workouts, and I try to do some stuff after my workouts as well to like loosen up. I always like to hit a sauna after and stretch in the sauna. But as far as like other things that I do, I think you nailed it with doing stuff that you love, like making sure you're fitting that time in for things that you love doing. I try to read every day as much as I can, just some growth books, some just personal development stuff that helps me move forward in like my personal health, mental health, my business, all of that stuff. I try to schedule 30 minutes, generally do like 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. Meditation is something when I'm really feeling my best. Like that's a morning and an evening thing for me, like something short in the morning to help me get into a good headspace for the day, help me feel good. And then a little bit longer in the evening to like calm down. So part of my nighttime routine to do some meditation. And so those are some big things that pop up to me. Like golf, I try to schedule 2 to 3 golf rounds a week. I've been trying to get more into hiking. Like walks are a form of self-care for me. I love to just be outside. And that's something that I'm doing a lot of, like being in sun, drinking a lot of water, like just like all those kind of things that are really within the basics for us. Like we talk about the basics, we talk about the fundamentals of any sort of health, fitness, fat loss, muscle building plan. And that stuff is always going to be the the stuff that's going to help you. Like eating quality foods is a form of self-care, right? Like all these things that help us feel a little bit better, that help us relax, that help us de-stress, that help us become a little bit better version of ourselves. Those are all self-care. And I would just challenge people out there listening to this to like think of these as similar, the same as your work, right? I think that a lot of times what we do and what I've done in the past is I put my work above my self-care. And like you do that enough times, sometimes you're going to have seasons where you maybe have to do that, right? Like you're going to have these crazier seasons of work, busier seasons at work, whatever your job is, business, maybe you have, quarters where you're really pushing hard in your business. That's going to happen. But if you can think of your self-care as on the same level as your business or as your work or as all of that stuff, I think long term, it's going to end up working out a lot better for those people, just because it's like, it's easy to slip. It's easy to convince yourself that these things that are really wearing you down are going to end up working out better for you. But I think over time, you do that enough times, you just run yourself into the ground, you burn out. You think about quitting because you're like, oh, this kind of fucking sucks. Like, it just kind of forms your mind in a different way, and you start making decisions in a different way, and you start like, thinking differently. It's just, there's so many different things that I think happen from that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if, I think of people when they come to me or they ask or they suggest what they can do for things of self-care, and they tell you their story. A lot of times, everything that they're telling you is hectic, man. Like the amount of stress that they're describing their story with. And it comes in, obviously stress comes in so many different forms, but I think finding ways to de-stress, finding ways to let the weight off your shoulders a little bit, finding ways to, and if we go back to the physical side of things, most people, misunderstand the importance of rest and recovery. I think a lot of people, when they go into the gym, they feel like they're getting stronger. And so I encourage people to look through the different lens. And this is just for the physical side. Maybe it correlates to all the other stuff we're talking about too. But like, people think they're going in the gym and they're going to lift weights and they get stronger. You actually are doing damage to your muscle tissue. So I remind people that of like, no, we're just going to come in and we're actually causing trauma to the body. It is a form of stress in a good way. But your actual gains come in your recovery. So the things that you were talking about earlier, your sleep, your hydration, we talked about mobility. We talked about all the fundamentals. That's where the actual gains are made. And it's funny because those are the areas that most people neglect. And so if we're really talking about self-care, it's like, I always imagine or paint this picture in my head of your baseline. So where's your baseline at? When you come in and you work out, we actually are causing trauma and micro tears to the tissue, which is taking us down below baseline. And in order to come back up to baseline, to be able to repeat the process and make our muscle tissue more resilient, we have to recover, right? So we have to repair. We have to get adequate protein, sleep, hydration, right? All these things. And if you're not doing those things, let's say you don't quite come back up to baseline and you go into the gym and you quote unquote try to crush it again. Well, you're actually just tearing yourself down further. And so now your recovery process has to be even greater to come back up to baseline. So I always encourage people to look through that lens, understand that you're causing damage and stress to the muscle tissue and to the body. And the actual gains, the actual progress is in the self-care, is in the recovery, is in the things that you're actually doing outside of the gym. And I know they don't seem important, and it's way cooler to like look at the weight that you're putting on the bench press or like how much you're deadlifting and like doing all those things. Those are awesome. Those are super cool. But if you want to see those things continuously go up, meaning the numbers, you want to see your form get better, you want to see your performance get better time and time again, it's so crucial in what you're doing the other 23 hours outside of your workout that will determine the trajectory of that single hour that you're doing your workout for. And so when you bring your focus to that, and I think you shift your minds, and by the way, that when I say recovery, it could also mean the things that you and I were talking about before, like just going and doing the shit you love, because you're going to elicit some good blood flow by going and golfing 18 holes and getting some steps in and being out in nature, right? Like you're going to be able to recover your body in that aspect instead of, and those of you that work a lot too, and you guys are all, working on Zoom and on the computer a lot, that applies to you too. So taking that break and giving yourself some self-care to get outside, to get some fresh air, to stop staring at your screen the whole time, to stop hunching over and rounding your shoulders forward. Like some self-care would be something as simple that I prescribe for my clients is doing some banded pull aparts, right? Retracting and pulling your shoulder blades back and doing 3 sets of 10, or every time you have a break in between meetings, have your resistance band right there at your desk where you can do some of those so that you're not looking like a hunchback all the time. Time and time again, you'll see, especially people that are older, right? You see it in a lot of elderly people. They have that rounded over, like hunchback posture, right? And so being able to give yourself that self-care and actually be aware of it is a whole nother battle too. But yeah, those are just some things that come to mind that I deal with clients that I see that's very common. And being able to look through that lens in terms of your body progressing in the physical aspect, it's so important, and it's determined on how much weight you're going to actually give to the self-care portion of it, which seems totally backwards, when you think about it, but
it's almost like a bank account.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a bank account, like where every time you do certain things, like say even working out, right? It's a net benefit for a lot of people, right? Like it's like you end up like you tear down your muscle to have it grow back stronger if you're recovering, right? Like you were talking about. But let's say that's like a deposit initially, right? And then like going to sleep on a good time it's a withdrawal rather, like that workout is that, deciding to go out and drink is a withdrawal. Deciding to, eat the pizza and the processed food is a withdrawal, right? Like all these things are withdrawals. And I'm not saying you shouldn't withdraw. I withdraw. Hell, I've withdrawn a lot of times this week, like as
Me
we,
too. Me too.
that happened, right? Like this, like I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm perfect and that I'm not. And this is like the least perfect time of my life right now. But that's not to say that I still don't make time for these deposits, right? Going to sleep, getting my 8 hours, reading a book, going out on a walk with Coco, spending some time outside at the pool, going and golfing, doing all these things, stretching, mobility, going in the sauna, taking a cold shower, whatever it may be. Like all these things are deposit. And I feel like these deposits, like you got to keep doing them over and over again and be consistent with them, because if you make a few big ass withdrawals, like you can make a day of withdrawals that's going to do a number on you, right? Like you're going to feel like complete shit for a few days. Like if you go out and you get absolutely obliterated, maybe it causes you to just feel like shit for 2-3, you're hungover or whatever. Like as you get older, you get even more hungover. And we could do an episode on alcohol as well. I don't know if we've really done that. I think that would be a good one. But
yeah, let's do that.
This is all to say that like there's like if you just kind of continue to build on what you have and you want like schedule time in your calendar for these things that make you feel your best, that help you relax, that help you have a different frame of mind. Right, because I was actually thinking about this when you were talking, but like there's like mentally, it's so like crazy how some of these like simple things can just change the game for you, right? Like it's just you do a few things and you get to a point if you're not sleeping, like mentally, like I'm just not in a good place, right? I'm not making decisions that are aligned with myself. So I'm making a lot more withdrawals from that bank account. I'm doing a lot more things that are tearing my body down, tearing my mind down, losing my confidence, all these things. But it just really starts with like just one thing, deciding that you're going to get up today and you're going to go on a walk, deciding you're going to get up today and you're going to meditate, you're going to do gratitude, you're going to get a good breakfast in, like even if that's just something super simple that has like some good quality foods and protein in, like all of these things. If you think of everything that's just moving you closer to that version of yourself you want to be, anything that helps you recover, helps you feel better, helps you enjoy life more, then you start to really understand what self-care is, as opposed to like sometimes I think in the past what I've thought of it as is like, a lot more woo-woo stuff, right? It's like a lot more of the woo-woo, like, oh, I got to meditate, I got to do breath work and whatever. And I love those things personally, but not everybody vibes with those. Understand that water, food, exercise, walking, stretching, all these things. You were talking about like the band pull parts. I have like one of those door pull-up bars. And I've spent a lot of the last few weeks, like when I walk by, I'll just hang on it for like 30 seconds. Right. And that is a great thing as well. Like I feel so much better doing that. And that's just a simple thing too. If you have that, or if you have like a a tube. I got like one of those tubes where you can kind of do the shoulder dislocates and whatever. Like just somebody who's working, you mentioned getting up and do something, right? Like stretch for a little bit, do some sort of hip opener, do some sort of exercise that's going to help you. Because, if you're taking breaks, if you're prioritizing your body, prioritizing your mindset, your mental side of things, like you're going to be a lot more productive in the workplace as well. Like I encourage some of my clients who are really stressed at work and like take a little walk around every hour, right? Like, work for 45 minutes to an hour, go on a 5-minute like walk around the house or around the block or whatever. Just get up and I found with these people who do this and they buy into it that they're more productive, right? Because you're taking these breaks, these mental breaks that we all need. Like we can't work for 8 hours straight. Like you maybe think you are, but it's just not. I don't think it's really possible. I think, even like 90-minute blocks and then taking some time for yourself and stretching, walking around, doing some push-ups, like get some blood flow going. Like that's a lot that can help some of these people that are sitting at a desk all day as well.
Dude, you're hitting it on the head. And like the things that you're mentioning right now, I would encourage people, the easiest way to transition and integrate that into your daily schedule is to make it part of your routine. If you can like eliminate or lower the friction to be able to do some of these things, knowing that they're going to improve and move the needle for you, whether it's with your posture, your positioning, your overall well-being, your health, whatever it is, integrate it into your routine and almost like gamify it. Like Alex, you used a perfect example of like, dude, every time I walk by my pull-up bar, I'm knocking out a 30-second hang or whatever it is, right? Like my clients with the bands and that we're working on their postures, every time they're done or off the meeting, they have 2 sets of 10, right? 2 sets of 10, they can rest 30 seconds to 1 minute, but they're knocking out those 2 sets of 10 with the resistance bands on their pull-aparts. Just gamify it and like set it in stone, make it a non-negotiable for you. And then all of a sudden, that transition is going to be so much more seamless because it's not this extra thing that you have to do. It's just something that you gamified and kind of put in your routine and it's integrated and it'll feel a lot more seamless. The first couple of times, of course, it's going to feel new. You're going to be like, oh man, I forgot to do it this time. Or man, I only did it this time, and you'll get over that. And then all of a sudden it'll be part of your routine. It'll no longer have to be like this extra thing that you have to schedule out. You just know every time you walk by the pull-up bar, you're going to knock out 30 seconds. Or every time you finish your meeting or your call, you're knocking out 2 sets of 10 on the resistance band. Like whatever it is, if you can find a way to gamify it, the friction is going to be a lot lower. The chances of you completing it are going to be a lot higher. And then that way you can just more so integrate it into your daily life.
I love it, dude. I think this has been good. You got anything else for the peeps out there?
No, man, just to, if you guys did get any value from this and you found somebody or know somebody that could benefit from it, all we ask is that you guys share it with them. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But if you have somebody on the top of your mind that could benefit from this stuff, point them in the right direction.
I love it, dude. Yeah, you said it best. We appreciate you watching every week, listening, and start with something small. If you're not doing much self-care, find one thing you can do tomorrow that's going to help build that. And then, just work on one thing. Like if you're like, I love reading. I haven't been reading for a long time. Schedule in 10 minutes of reading, something small, something you can do. Let's do that for 30 days. Do something you love for 30 days. Do something that helps you relax for 30 days and build on it as you go. And I think you'll be a completely different person after that. But thanks again, everybody, for taking the time to watch, listen. We appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe, you like this, so you don't miss any of our future episodes. We appreciate you, and we hope you have a good rest of the week.